Well, it's quite hard to believe this, but today we're coming to the end of a 5-year project. There have been 28 television programmes, 28 long chapters on a subject called How to Cook. And I thought it would be appropriate to end How to Cook on a high note and look at how to cook for parties and gatherings. Well, I want to show you some recipes from a menu I've comprised for a hot buffet party which is good for the winter. And it's actually got a Middle Eastern flavour, so I've called it a Middle Eastern buffet. And the recipes I'm going to show you are calculated to serve 12 people, so if you want to serve 12, 24, 36, everything's worked out for you. But I'm actually going to demonstrate them for just 6 people, so that if you're not having a party, well, you can still make them and enjoy them anyway. And the recipe I'm going to show you first is called spiced lamb koftas, and they're braised in a tomato sauce. Now what you need for that, to start off with, is 1.5 pounds of minced lamb, and that's waiting here in my bowl, and it's just ready minced lamb, so that's quite an easy one. And then over here I've got some spices, and if you remember on the last series we dealt with how to dry roast spices and then grind them with a pestle and mortar, and that's what I've done. And I've actually got here 1.5 teaspoons of roasted coriander seeds and roasted cumin seeds, 1.5 teaspoons of each. They're going to go in with the lamb. And then the other ingredients I've got, I'm going to chop them in a food processor, and I'll just run through what they are as they go in. First of all, I've got a really large onion, so that's going to go in. And then I've got 1.5 tablespoons of fresh mint leaves, and 1.5 tablespoons of fresh coriander leaves. And I'm going to chop them the lazy way, so we'll do that. They need to be quite finely chopped, and then they're just going to go in. Get rid of the blade first. They're just going to go in and join the meat and the spices, and we've got all these lovely Middle Eastern flavours here. Lamb, coriander leaves and coriander seeds together, and cumin seeds. Now you'll have to be a bit more careful than me about scraping everything out. Next thing we need is some salt and some freshly milled pepper. And then take a large fork, and now you've got to do quite a bit of hefty mixing, just to mix all those ingredients really thoroughly together. Wonderful perfumes even now before they're being cooked. The aroma is very tantalising. What you're going to do now is divide them into little koftas, and they're little rounds, and they're just very slightly larger than the size of a walnut. So you just take a little piece like that and just make it into a round with your hands. And then for 6 people, you'll get 24 little rounds like that size. And then what happens to them is they need to be browned. So what you do is you heat up a couple of tablespoons of oil in a frying pan, and here they are. They've already been browned. What you do is you brown them so that they're nice and really quite toasted around the edges, which is going to give a nice flavour. And the way to do that is to brown them 6 at a time, no more, or you'll crowd the pan and it'll get all steamy and they won't brown. So 6 at a time, doesn't take too long. Right, they're all ready now. Next we have to deal with the sauce. And in my pan here is another onion. This time it's a medium onion that's been chopped quite small, and it's just been sautéing in a tablespoon of olive oil until it's become a sort of pale golden colour, as you can see, like that, and it's softened. And now I'm going to add 2 cloves of garlic, which have already been crushed, and they're going to join the onion. And then, waiting over there in this bowl are 1.5 pounds of red ripe tomatoes, and these have been skinned and chopped. And they're going to cook down to a lovely concentrated sauce. And there's one more flavour, one more Middle Eastern flavour that's going to go into the sauce, which is a stick of cinnamon, a whole cinnamon stick, which will just sort of permeate the tomatoes beautifully. Now we're going to add the koftas, they're going to go in. And we'll give just one more stir. And then what we need to do now, when it really boils, is turn the heat down and let it simmer really, really gently with a lid on for half an hour. So put a timer on, leave the lid on for half an hour, and then after half an hour, take the lid off and let them finish cooking for another half an hour without the lid, so the sauce can evaporate and concentrate down to a lovely consistency. So we'll let those cook now, and then you can have a look at them. So what we end up with here are spicy lamb koftas with a lovely thick, luscious tomato sauce. It's just got a slight flavour of cinnamon, and they need to be piled into a really warm serving bowl, and then you can take them to the table to serve, and people can help themselves. And what I've done here is I've got roasted yellow peppers here. They've just been roasted in the oven with a little bit of garlic and oil, and then they're filled with a Middle Eastern rice pilaf, and that's got toasted pine nuts and currants in it, and a little bit of onion. And then I've got some rice left over, so if anybody wants more rice, they can have more rice, but the first lot of rice is served in the pepper, garnished with a few mint leaves. So that's two of the items for our hot buffet, and now I'm going to show you something else. This is another menu, this time for a summer buffet. Watercress soup can be served chilled if you're lucky enough with the weather, otherwise is equally good served hot. Once a year I like to splash out on a wild salmon, much nicer than the farmed variety, and I serve it with a sauce verte flavoured with summer herbs. And finally, a gooseberry tart with a filling made with crème fraîche. Greek orange and honey syrup cake, literally dripping with the flavour of oranges and honey, and then topped with Greek yoghurt and pistachios. And here's how you make that really luscious, brilliant cake. It's very, very easy. You won't believe how simple it is. The first ingredient you need are 2 oranges, and they have been cut into little chunks like this. And what we're going to do is process the oranges in the food processor as they are, just in little chunks like that, so that what happens when we come to make the cake is that the whole oranges go into it, everything, pith, skin, everything, and that's what gives it a most incredible flavour. So we'll just make them now into a puree. The only thing you have to be careful of when you make this puree is you don't have any pips in the oranges, because they get caught in the processor, so we don't want any pips in. There we go. Now that's all ready to go into the cake. What I'm now going to do is make up the mixture, and this is, as we did early on in How to Cook, an all-in-one cake mixture. So everything goes in the bowl at once. First of all, 6 ounces of softened butter, and it has to be really soft, sort of room temperature, so you can put a knife in and make an impression. Then I've got 6 ounces of golden caster sugar. That's going to go in. 3 whole eggs next. And then the Greek ingredients that I've got here are 9 ounces of semolina, which is going to give a lovely texture to the cake. And then 4.5 ounces of ground almonds. And then I've got some baking powder here. Because it's all in one, you use quite a lot, and that's 4½ teaspoons. So that's going to go in next. And now we're just going to go in with the electric whisk and try and save some butter from my spatula there, and then whisk it into a cake mix. So off we go. You probably need to give this about 1½ to 2 minutes whisking just to make sure it's all blended properly. Now, all I have to do is get the orange and fold it in. So I'm going to use a large spoon for that. It's a wonderful colour. When you've pureed a whole orange like this, it does look the most beautiful, beautiful colour. So that's just going to be folded into the mixture. And then I've got a cake tin over there that's waiting. It's a 10-inch cake tin. A round cake tin, but you can make it in a 9-inch square tin if you prefer. And what you have to do with the cake tin is just butter it and then line it with some silicone paper, just a round of silicone paper. So now the mixture goes into the tin. I'll switch to my spatula to get it all out. And then all you do then is just level it off. Like this. And this cake I'm making now, this 10-inch round will serve 12 people, but we've done a smaller version for you in the recipe, so if you want to make it for less people, we've done an 8-inch cake for you as well. You preheat the oven to 200 degrees, which is quite hot. Pop the cake into the oven on the centre shelf, and then you cook it for 10 minutes and turn the oven down to 180 degrees and cook it for a further 40 to 45 minutes. But that's not all. There's something else that goes with this cake, and we'll go and have a look at that now. Well, what happens is when the cake is cooked, it has a syrup poured over it to make it really nice and moist and luscious. And in the saucepan here, I started making the syrup with 8 ounces of Greek mountain honey, and I added to that 5 tablespoons of water and a cinnamon stick, and then you bring it up to simmering point and you let it simmer very gently for 5 minutes, and then turn the heat out, and 2 more ingredients are added to the syrup. The first one is 5 tablespoons of orange juice, and the second one is 1½ tablespoons of lemon juice. So the syrup's now ready. All we've got to do is wait for the cake to be cooked. When the cake comes out of the oven, the first thing you do is prick it with a skewer, and then you pour the syrup in. Now, the first thing you're going to think of is that all that syrup won't go into that cake, but it will go in. And if you just pour it slowly, you'll find that it does go on and on absorbing it, and you get a lovely sticky cake at the end of it. So this is our finished Greek orange cake, and the finishing touches are we spread over the top some full-fat Greek yogurt and then sprinkled some pistachio nuts. So you've got the sort of fragrance of the cake, the creaminess of the yogurt and the crunchiness of the nuts. But there's still something else, just a little bit more sweetness. What we're going to do now is just drizzle a little bit of honey on the top. This is a cold alternative for a winter party. These mini Yorkshire puddings were a revelation to me. They're filled with rare roast beef and a spicy horseradish and mustard creme fraiche sauce. These are caramelised onion tartlets, and they're made with goat's cheese and thyme. And this is the one hot item I would always serve with a cold buffet. Baked potatoes with Gruyere cheese and chives. This is a curried turkey salad with dried fruits. It's also excellent for using up turkey at Christmas, or you can make it with cold chicken. These are little pork sautés, and they're served with a spicy peanut sauce. And I've done 2 puddings. Lemon roulades, and this one's chocolate ricotta cheesecake. Usually if you're having any kind of buffet party, it's quite a good idea to have 2 desserts. So I've prepared 2 desserts for you today. One is a pistachio ice cream, which we've made in the ice cream maker that we saw earlier in the season. And now I want to show you something that goes with the pistachio ice cream, and these are called pistachio wafers. Now you start off by making a filling for the wafers, and in my bowl here I've got 3 ounces of sifted unrefined icing sugar, so that's slightly creamy in colour, but it has a nice flavour than the white icing sugar. And to that I'm going to add half a teaspoon of powdered cinnamon. And after the cinnamon, here I've got some pistachio nuts, and they're bought in little packets ready shelled, and they've been fairly finely chopped. So in go the pistachio nuts, and then I'm just going to mix all that together. And this is going to make a filling for the wafers. Now, the good news about this, the easy bit, is we're going to make them with phyllo pastry, which you buy in packets already made, and you just unroll the sheets of pastry and keep them in a folded tea cloth like this. Because they're just made with flour and water, they dry very quickly, so you need to keep them covered. So we're going to take 1 sheet of phyllo pastry and put it on the board like that. And then in my saucepan here I've got 4 ounces of melted butter, and I've used some of the butter to butter a baking sheet which I'm going to cook them on, and the rest, what happens now is you brush the melted butter onto the phyllo pastry and get it as evenly as possible. Brush it on as evenly as possible. And then you sprinkle about a tablespoon of the mixture as evenly as you can all over. Then the next bit is another sheet of phyllo pastry, and that sheet goes on top of this like that. We cover the rest up so it doesn't dry out, and then just press it down. Press it very well down all over. Don't worry if some of the sharp ends of the nuts stick through. That's all right. Now, you brush with melted butter again, another tablespoon, and you go on until you've finished the 6 sheets of phyllo. And then I'm just going to get rid of this one now because I've got one already, so you don't have to wait while I do them all. You cut them into 4 strips. So in half and then in half again, so you've got 4 like this. And then what you do is take a sharp knife and you cut these wafers into very haphazard triangles. So we'll start with one there, and then perhaps we'll have another one here. Then they go onto a baking sheet that's brushed with butter, some of the butter that's in the recipe, and then they go into an oven that's preheated to 180 degrees, and they're only actually going to take 10 minutes to cook. Well, here is our pistachio ice cream, and one little tip: if you want to serve ice cream at a party, the best way to do it is to make all the scoops ahead and then open freeze them in the freezer like this, just covered with foil or something, and then when you get them out they'll all be ready to eat. It's very difficult trying to scoop ice cream for a lot of people at the last minute. So, lovely, beautiful pistachio ice cream, and to serve with it, pistachio wafers. And all they need now, when they've cooled down from the oven, is a little bit of icing sugar. And so you've got the lovely cool ice cream and the real sort of crunchy pistachio wafer to go with it. What could be nicer? So there we are. Pistachio wafers with pistachio ice cream. Now this brings us to the end of how to cook. It's amazing. We started in 1997 and we're now in another century and we've done a lot of cooking together. Well, I hope you've enjoyed it all as much as I've enjoyed it. I have only two things to say to you. One is happy cooking always, and the other is if it doesn't always go as you want it to go, don't worry. Looking on the website, there's one lady who... We're just going to sprinkle it with a little bit of cocoa powder, just to make it look pretty. And that's an outtake.
That's gonna.
I don't think it's holding up very well.
No.
No.